Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Odds and Ends here on bet.nola.com, brought to you by Caesar Sportsbook with Devin Jackson and Taysom Hill's biggest fan, Jim Derry. I'm Zach Ewing, and we're set for I'm starting it already, man. We're set for a week, an hour of recapping the weekend. The Saints' historic win over the Bucs last night. I did say historic, and I'll explain that. Two Monday games, one of which is just starting right now in Cleveland, and two Tuesday games in the NFL, plus college bowl season and everything else. We want to start by reminding you on this holiday week, if you want to have a Happy New Year, you can sign up for the Caesar Sportsbook app. You can do that now, NOLA.com/Caesars. A $100 bonus when mobile goes live. Mobile betting expected to go live sometime in January, and you can get that bonus for yourself now at NOLA.com/Caesars. So go ahead and do that, and we will talk plenty of Saints and Bucs. I'm going to let Jim have the floor for a minute later. But first, I do want to mention today's games. And real quick, we'll get to the game in Cleveland since it just did start. Raiders at Browns. And the Raiders, this game has flipped. It's jumped the fence twice now. When it was supposed to be Saturday originally, the Browns had all sorts of COVID problems. They went from being favored to being underdogs. Then they postponed it. The NFL postponed it to today. And the Browns were favored again, the thinking being they would at least get one of their quarterbacks back, either Baker Mayfield or Case Keenum. They didn't, and so now the Raiders are favored again. If it's me, I'm staying far away from this thing, and it's started now already. But Jim, how do you even bet a game like this?
I bet it. I bet it after I found out about Nick Mullins. I waited till it got to +3, and I bet the Browns, and who still have Nick Chubb and a great defense, and Dearness Johnson, and playing against the team that's lost 5 of the last 6 games, and I have no problem with it. I don't think Mullins is that much of a downgrade from the other guys that we're going to play. I'm betting on the Browns running game, and I'm betting on a low scoring game, and I just don't think the Raiders are very good.
Yeah, I mean, there are worse teams to be down to their third string quarterback, because you mentioned the running game is great in Cleveland. Defense is pretty good. And as far as third string quarterbacks go, I mean, Nick Mullins started a couple years ago. I mean, like, he's not, as a third string quarterback, he's about as good as you could hope for. Devin, what you looking for in this one?
Honestly, I don't know. To be honest, I mean, it's a game just like slap in the middle of the day. Obviously, moved because of COVID. I'm kind of more intrigued than in the bowl game, but for the game, I think it's going to be a lot of running from both sides. The Raiders clearly don't trust Derek Carr throwing the football, and he's just, for whatever reason, he's continuing to revert back to kind of his old ways of not tagging down the field. So the Browns defense is really good, and I think they'll give them an opportunity to win this game. I could see the Browns very well winning this one and winning it convincingly. I think they have found a recipe for success, and the Raiders I think they're just trying to get to the offseason at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the Raiders have offensive line problems, plain and simple. I don't think they have the time to give Derek to throw downfield. They don't have a running game. They've got problems on both. Their defensive line's okay. Their offensive line's a mess. But it's not a good situation for the Raiders. And if they lose this one, they really will be looking to the offseason, because that's about all she wrote, I think, if they lose this one. The game later tonight, Vikings at Bears. This one has a lot to do. We'll get to Mullins and Simeon here in a few minutes. I don't. Trevor Simeon like triggers something in Jim Derry. It's not pretty. It's not pretty. He's muted. He's not even going to say anything. All right, the game later tonight, Vikings and Bears. This game does have a lot to do with the Saints' playoff implications. They could really use the Bears to spring an upset here. I don't know how likely that is. The Bears' top corner is out, Jalen Jones. That means Justin Jefferson for the Vikings. You expect him maybe to have a big day. Now, it is Kirk Cousins in primetime. We all know he's struggled in primetime before. But Adam Thielen looks like he could be back. Dalvin Cook is going strong. The Vikings know they need this one. Jim, not a lot of reason to have faith in the Bears here, I wouldn't think. You're muted still, Jim.
Sorry, guys. I had some mic issues. I I hope you didn't hear what I heard through my headset just a moment ago. Anyway, I don't see how the Vikings, I don't see how they don't win big here. Dalvin Cook, like I heard the tail end of what you were saying, but the Bears are having major issues, and I didn't hear if you talked about this, but the Bears are having major issues with their defensive backs and COVID. And I think that it's a great spot for the Vikings. The only thing that scares me is the fact that they've won all these close games, or they played in all these close games. So even last week against the Steelers and letting the Steelers back in and end up making it a close game. So that makes me a little bit nervous. But I still, this is a game where I have played it as well. It's part of another teaser that I played. I had Cincinnati and Minnesota in teasers. So I really like Minnesota tonight, but I haven't had the greatest of weeks. So who knows?
Yeah, the Bears Bears have all 4 starting defensive backs out, and I think that's mostly COVID. They have huge COVID problems. I said Jalen Jones. It's Jalen Johnson who's their top corner, who's out. And Justin Jefferson could have a huge day. Devin, how about you? Any reason for Saints fans to hope for the upset here?
I mean, the Vikings have played down to their opponents this year. So, I mean, that would be the biggest takeaway for this game is that they let the Bears hang around and make it a close game at the end. I think the Vikings ultimately win the game, but I can't recall a Vikings game this season that has been normal or has gone exactly to plan for them. There's always some sort of comeback in the second half on either side of the coin for them. So I would expect this to be a close game. I think the Bears cover tonight, but I think the Vikings win.
All right. And again, that we'll get to the playoff picture. In fact, as we move on, let's look at the weekend results here on Odds and Ends on bet.nola.com. And it was, it was another crazy week. Obviously the Saints win. We'll talk about that here extensively in a minute, covering as 11.5-point underdogs. And they weren't even the biggest underdog to win. The Lions thumped the Cardinals. I mean, it wasn't even close. 30-12 was 13-point underdogs. The Ravens very nearly won as a 9-point dog and went for 2 again and got stopped. And then the Colts beat the Patriots on Saturday night. Chiefs beat the Chargers in overtime on Thursday night. Those are big results. Just another week of puzzle pieces we get to put together here, guys.
Yeah, it was a rough week for me, who had the Cardinals as my last knockout pick. So that's $13,000 my kids won't see for Christmas, but it is what it is. But yeah, it was another surprising week. The whole second half of the season really is. We've had some interesting things happen, and I had the Ravens. I had the Packers at 6.5, and they let the touchdown in, and just brutal things that went on throughout the weekend for me. So I guess as good as it was the weekend before, kind of got back at me this week. But I still have a chance to have a winning week if I can finish out with 3 victories tonight and tomorrow. 4, yeah. 3 I need 3 and 4.
I gotta say, Jim, if you having the Cardinals at this point in the knockout pool, you were in a good spot. I mean, you had to feel good about that. It's just sometimes nothing you can do.
I did, and a lot of times, just like I told you about the first knockout pool that I was in when I took Dallas, when I hemmed and hawed between the Cowboys and the Bengals when the Cowboys lost on Thanksgiving, and that cost me a share of $20,000 and ended up being a 4-way chop, and I could have got in on that, and if it had, I'd just taken the Bengals. But this time, you're right. I mean, there's no. I mean, that's just a fluke. That they play that game 15 times, you're going to win 13 out of 15. So it is what it is. But yeah, so I'm not that upset about it in the grand scheme of things. I made the best pick I could make there. But hey, look, the Lions are playing pretty well right now. And we're going to get into the Saints in a minute. But I think some crazy things are going to happen down the stretch. This will be the last one of these. There'll be some weird things going on as the Jags now have the number 1 pick. I don't think that's going to change. I think they'll lose out, and so back-to-back number 1 picks for Jacksonville, I think. So Detroit fans, I don't know whether they're happy or sad going into today.
Yeah, it's that. I mean, I think at some point you could starve for wins. Number 1 picks are great, but at some point you just want to see your team win, and so that's the way I feel about it. When you look at those results, Devin, obviously a lot of playoff implications here. The Steelers really helped themselves by holding off the Titans. The Saints really helped themselves. But until we get into the Saints, what other result really caught your eye?
It had to be the Lions and Cardinals. I just think the Cardinals now, I mean, they were pretty much a lock to win the NFC West a couple weeks ago. Now it's not so sure. You know, the Rams are now back in it, and they're clearly the better team now. They're playing like the best team in the NFC. And with the Bucs losing, last night, I think the NFC continues to be wide open. And I've been pondering this take for a couple of weeks now, but I think this could be the year that a 5, 6, 7 seed from the NFC could make it to the Super Bowl, because it's all about who the matchups are, who you match up best with. And the Saints clearly match up really well with the Bucs, and you look at some of the other teams on the board. The Cardinals aren't matching up well, as of late against a physical team like the Rams. So I think this NFC playoff is going to be probably more interesting in recent years than we've seen.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with you, because you look at some of the teams that are going to be wild cards. The 49ers look dangerous. If the Rams end up being a wild card, they're going to be dangerous, or the Cardinals. I don't know. The Saints, it's a good enough segue to talk about the Saints, because I don't know if they have the goods to make a deep playoff run, just because they're so limited offensively. Now, if they could get healthy, and get both those tackles back, Armstead and Ramczyk, maybe that's a little bit of a different story. But let's talk about that game last night. I mean, Jim, we'll start with you. You've been watching the Saints a long time. This had to remind you of some of those Bum Phillips games from the 80s, maybe some of the Jim Morgan. I mean, this was as dominant a defensive performance against a great offense. And I know they lost players last night to injury, the Bucs did, but that's still a great offense. Obviously, an all-time great quarterback, and the Saints just shut it down.
Yeah, I tried to come up with some perspective on Datitude this morning, and with Jeff Duncan, and really some games that came into my mind as far as improbability goes. It's got to be in the top 3 or 4 for sure. If you look at, in fact, in regular season, I think there's only really 1 or 2 other ones that compare. A friend of mine texted me after he listened to Datitude. He said they beat the Rams on the road, greatest show on turf the year they ended up winning their first playoff game ever in 2000. Beat them on the road as 13.5-point underdogs. Aaron Brooks' first game after Jeff Blake was injured, and no one expected him to win. So that one's definitely up there. And another regular season game that came to mind to me was in 1987, for those of you old enough to remember, the first real good year the Saints ever had. It was under Jim Moore. It was the strike season. They went 12-3. They had won 3 games in a row, gone home to play the Giants, the Bill Parcells-led Giants, Super Bowl team Giants, that had just been beating everybody up. And the Saints went into it and had never won 4 games in a row in their history. I mean, that's hard to fathom that you're, almost 20 years into your history and you had never won 4 games in a row. They had a chance to do it in front of, it was a Summerall and Madden game, a 325 game, and on CBS, and the Saints won, and they won it with defense, and Ricky Jackson and Pat Swilling both had a big game. Sam Mills, Vaughn Johnson, the whole Dome Patrol had a great game. The secondary had a great game as well. So those were the 2 games that came to my mind. And other than that, as far as improbability goes, you got to talk maybe about that same year in 2000 when they lost to the Rams at home on the last week of the regular season, to depend on who won the division and who didn't. They ended up playing the Rams again the following week in the Dome, and they beat the Rams again. They beat them on the Azakim dropped the ball on a muff punt, and it was the first Saints playoff victory ever. They had never had a playoff victory before then. Then really you got to put the Super Bowl up there, because the Saints winning as 7-point underdogs. You're playing in your first Super Bowl game, and I realize the Saints were 13-3, but you're playing against Peyton Manning, who I think they were 14-2 that year, the number 1 seed, and everyone picked the Colts to win the Super Bowl, and so obviously that one way more significant. But those are the games. Other than that, I mean, that's why I think this game has to rank in the top 5 for sure of most improbable Saints victories. And again, not just because of that they won, but the fact of how they won, and you could have told me, you could have given me 500 different scores, and 9-0 would have been the last one I picked. And then if you would have said it was going to be 9-0, I would have said, there's no way in hell that the Saints are holding Tampa Bay to 9 points. That would have been my response.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned the history, because I went back this morning, and you can find it on bet.nola.com, and looked. OddsShark has a great database where you can look in, various teams, how many times have they been this point underdog, et cetera, et cetera. And so the last 5 times the Saints won outright as a double-digit underdog, and the database only goes back to 1985, and you actually have to go back to 85 to find 5 instances of the Saints winning outright as double-digit underdogs. Last night was the 5th. The other 4, one of them you mentioned, it was Aaron Brooks' first game. They were 13-point underdogs and beat the Rams. They also beat the Rams the next year in St. Louis in a game where they were down 24-6 at halftime, came back.
That's right. Yeah.
They were double-digit underdogs in that game. And then the other 2 instances were against the 49ers. One was in 95. Elvis Gerbach was starting for an injured Steve Young. Jerry Rice set the all-time receiving record in that game for a career, but the Saints won the game. And then in 1985, so even before what you're talking about, there was a game in San Francisco where I had to go back. I found the video on YouTube. It was fantastic. Dave Wilson hits Eugene Goodlow for a 43-yard touchdown with like 8 minutes left to win the game. And, Eugene Goodlow beats Ronnie Lott, just dusts him. Dave Wilson throws the ball.
Eugene Goodlow was a good receiver.
Yeah, you got what is going on here? And the Saints went 5-11 that year or something. Maybe they were 7-9. But nobody. The 49ers were reigning Super Bowl champions. Nobody expected them to win. So you've got to go back 26 years to find 5 instances of them being this big of an underdog. So Devin, the question I pose to you is, how did they do it? What did you see scheme-wise or personnel-wise? What were they doing to stop Tom Brady so effectively?
They were daring him to beat him downfield. And once Godwin and Evans both went out of the game, and they had basically a crop of receivers that are inexperienced and not really top targets, they did what teams do to the Saints. They forced them to throw the ball down the field and make them throw it accurately. And they got pressure on him all night long, and they did not blitz Tom Brady. They got home with their front 4 consistently. Cam Jordan probably had one of his best games in maybe 2 years. Probably ever. I mean, it was one of his best games of his career, without a doubt. I mean, he dominated, Tristan Wirfs, who is a really good tackle, a really good young and upcoming tackle. And they said coming into the game, he only given up like 1 quarterback pressure the entire season up until that point, and he gave up multiple sacks to Cam Jordan. But they forced Tom Brady to beat them deep, and he couldn't do it. And I can't really explain, kind of the schematics point, because they weren't doing anything revolutionary. They were just challenging the receivers at the line of scrimmage. CJ Gardner-Johnson was once again in the middle of the action, being both all in Tom Brady's face and challenging receivers at the line of scrimmage. Gronk didn't look like himself either, but I think he's mostly on the back end of his career. So the Saints were the more physical team from this first snap, and they set the tone, and it was clear that they were there to not only dominate but win the game. And the defense was, kind of hell bent on, we'll do it ourselves, even if we don't score any touchdowns or even didn't get any points. Because this game, if it wasn't for Brett Maher, this game probably would have went to overtime and it did a tie, because neither team offensively did anything spectacular, but the defense played one of the best games I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, how about Brett Maher, huh? In 3 field goals, and the Saints couldn't buy a field goal earlier in the season, and none of those was really a chip shot either. I mean, they were 9-0. By the way, 9-0 as a final score. As Ronnie Temple points out here, I kind of thought that would be a rare score in NFL history. If you follow the Twitter account Scoregami, where they keep track of whether a score has ever happened before, They tweeted out last night that was the 30th time in NFL history at a
Yeah.
9-0 game. I wonder if a lot of those are like from the 40s when that was, you won games 9-0.
I know you guys are young, but back in when I was in high school and the day, I guess, in the 70s and back in the early 80s, it wasn't all that uncommon to see 10-0 and 13-0 and 13-3. I mean, it wasn't that uncommon. So I can imagine it would happen once a year or every other year back then, 9-0, 3 field goals. I mean, 8-0 would be a lot more strange than 9-0, I would think. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't happen much anymore. Shutouts don't happen that very often anymore. I mean, if you look back at that same year that I was talking about in '87, I don't know exactly how many shutouts they had, but they had more than one. And nowadays, multiple shutouts by any defense is very uncommon now. They just don't play ball the same way. So, yeah, I mean, you probably had over-unders back in the day, too, of low 30s if they even did that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's something you don't see very often with the rules. And that was one thing. The refs were letting them play, especially in the defensive backfield. And that's true for both sides, but they were letting them be physical. And that was clearly bothering Brady. And when you take away Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, like the Bucs didn't have last night, that changes things too. When you're asking third and fourth string wide receivers to beat this physical press coverage, and they just weren't able to do it. And so, that's and Gronk let one go through his hands, and they caught a couple of breaks, and that's what it takes to win a game like that. So it worked out. I want to move the conversation forward to the last 3 games now for the Saints, because this changes the equation. We talked about it on Thursday. Like, hey, if they lose this Bucs game, they really got to focus on the last 3. Count this one up as a loss. Let's see what they got to do. Well, now the equation has changed. But before we do that, there are 2 NFC games tomorrow night, both at 6:00. So let's talk about those games. The first one is the Washington football team in Philadelphia. This is obviously a huge game because both of these teams are 6-7. Assuming it doesn't end in a tie, one of them will be tied with the Saints at 7-7 for the final playoff spot, and it could be the Vikings too if they win tonight. The other one will fall a game off the pace. Now, the Saints have the tiebreaker with Washington. They do not have the tiebreaker with the Eagles. And so that's one half of this equation. The other half is these 2 teams play again in Washington in 2 weeks. And so if Washington, which has some super duper COVID problems of its own, if they get healthy by that time and they're at home, they may be the favorites in 2 weeks in this game. And I think the best case for the Saints guys is if they split these 2 games.
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead, Devin.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, definitely. And it's going to be tough for Washington to win tomorrow night. I mean, all the COVID issues, game gets moved. But, I mean, the Saints definitely will benefit from a Washington win here. Eagles they have been betting favorites all year long, so I'm not really surprised about the line. They love the Eagles, but there's just something about the Eagles to me that just feels like it's missing in terms of, them taking that next step and making the playoffs. We'll see what happens in the game on Tuesday night, but I wouldn't be surprised if Washington still found a way to win this one. This just feels like a prime letdown spot for the Eagles, losing games that they're supposed to win.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree. I just think the Eagles are a better team. But yeah, it would be great if the Eagles, for Saints fans, if the Eagles lost one of the games, but they still have to play Dallas. So, I mean, if you're a Saints fan, you have to look at it this way. I don't think 9-8 for the Saints is going to be good enough to get in. I think 9-8 for a team like the Eagles might be good enough to get in. 9-8 might be good enough for the Vikings. The Saints don't hold a lot of tiebreakers with the groups of teams. If they get head-to-head with Washington, great. Then obviously they win that. That's probably not going to happen. But the Saints need to look at it as they need to go 10-7 to get in the playoffs. We talked. Jeff Duncan thinks they can get in at 9-8. I don't. I think they need to go 10-7. Looking at how everything is shaping out, because somebody's going to go. Somebody you don't want to go 9-8 is going to go 9-8, and it's not that hard, really, for the Eagles to do. Especially, I think they're going to beat Washington twice personally. So you don't want it to come down to that. And even if you go 10-7, I mean, if the Eagles were to win out, and Frisco were to win, 2 of their last 3, the Saints are not going to get in at 10-7 either. So, I mean, they're not a sure thing to get in at 10-7. So I really think they have to win out. And to me, it all comes down to Monday night because I think they'll win their last two. Assuming that they win this week, if they can win this week and get to where the last two are relevant, I think they'll win them. If they don't win this week, then it doesn't matter anyway. We'll see what happens. But they got to win this week. I just think they have to. They can't fall behind and then try to catch up with just 2 games left.
Derek, we see your question down there. We'll get to that in just a second because I want to keep the focus on whether the Saints can make the playoffs. The other game tomorrow night is Seahawks at Rams. The Rams probably the team that benefited the most of all of these COVID postponements. They're getting a lot of players back, and they're favored by a full touchdown. And again, as Devin mentioned, really competing for the NFC West title still with a win here. They're only a game behind Arizona and breathing down their neck with 3 games to go. So having said that, here are your NFC odds to make the playoffs. And this is very apropos to what you were talking about, Jim. 49ers at this point, you got to figure they're going to make it. They probably are in just going 2-1 the rest of the way. They're up to -600. Most of this field is off the board, and that's because they all play outside of Atlanta. Those other 4 teams all play either tonight or tomorrow night. Vikings, Eagles, Washington, and Seattle. The Saints are up to +130, so just less than 50-50 odds essentially. And that matches, if you look at 538, which they do playoff percentages for every league, the Saints are at 49% right now. Now, I will say this, if they go 10-7, you can go in there and put in results. To your point about them not getting in at 10-7, if they go 10-7, they are 98% to make it. Chances are somebody somewhere is going to lose, and they're probably going to be fine. If you lose one, go ahead, Jim.
I don't know how they figure out these percentages because they were saying last night, the same people were saying that if the Saints, before the game, the Saints won, they'd be 42%. Now we're saying 49%. We're saying nobody knows. I mean, let's be realistic. I mean, you can use common sense really when it comes down to it. If they get 10-7, they're probably going to get in. I don't think it's 98% because I don't think there's a 2% chance that either the Eagles or the Vikings win out and the 49ers win 2 of 3. Because if those things happen, it's 0%. Okay, so you're telling me there's only a 2% chance that the Eagles win out, the Vikings win out, and the 49ers win 2 of 3. The Vikings have a really tough schedule. I get it. The Eagles easily beat the Washington twice and not easily beat Dallas, but I don't think that's 2%. So anyway, regardless, I don't care what the real number is. If you're looking at, I think that's a decent price on the Saints at 130. I wouldn't play it. If you want to play it, you should have played it already. But it comes down to forget about everybody else anyway. And I hope the Saints are saying this in house. Who cares with the Eagles and the Washington football team and the Vikings and the 49ers? Don't think about what they're all doing. Don't look at that stuff until you go into really the last week. I mean, you got to take care of your own business. If you don't beat the Dolphins, none of this matters. So that's what everybody should be focused on.
No, you're right. I mean, and the team can't sit here and look at percentages and all that jazz. That's for us to do, and that's why we're doing it. But the second half of my point there was, if the Saints do go 9-8, obviously the percentage drops down quite a bit. And again, you're right. NBC's got their odds. New York Times has its odds. 538 has its odds. ESPN has its odds. Like everybody's got different percentages for who's going to win what game. So these are all abstract figures, right? But the second half of my point was, if they are going to go 2-1, it's much better for the Saints to lose the Miami game because it's not a conference game and it's not a division game. So from that perspective, the tiebreakers will be helped by beating Carolina and Atlanta. It's going to help them in more tiebreakers, and that plays out. Like if you play that game on the little 538 website, they're in this about between 55 and 60% to make the playoffs if they go 2-1 with a loss to Miami. If they go 2-1 with a win over Miami, that drops down to like the 45% range. It's not a big difference, but there is a difference there in the tiebreaker. So it's one of those things where, yes, the Saints should just try to win all 3. I think that's obvious to say right now. But if they can, if you get to pick and choose, Carolina, they'll probably be favored by the most points. They'll be favored by 4 or 5 points, I would think, against Carolina at this point. And then Atlanta, that game may be
more
a
than
pick.
that. The Carolina game, they'll be more than 4-point favorites. Again, that'll be close to a touchdown. The way Carolina's playing in the dome right now, with the way if Carolina loses again this week and goes to 5-10, that'll be 6 or 7 points.
Here's one that I'll throw out there. What does the dome mean? They're 1-4 in the dome. They haven't played that well in the dome.
I guess don't look at it that way. Yeah, they don't. I don't think that gets factored in at this point. I think you look at the dome as a over the long haul type thing, and it's one of the few stadiums I think. Look, and Sharps talk about it all the time. Home field advantage doesn't mean nearly as much as it did even 5 or 10 years ago, but I think there are certain stadiums that it does mean something. Kansas City, Seattle, and Seattle hasn't played that well at home either, but they still get a home field advantage. So I think that the Saints, regardless that you're right, they haven't played well at home, but I don't think that's going to factor into what the spread will be.
No, I mean, no, but to the larger point, home field advantage is dropping. It's probably worth 2 points, 2.5 points. So I don't know. We'll see what that line is. It also depends on how the teams play this week. But
yeah, it used to be 3 or 3.5.
Yeah, Devin, as you look at it, how do you handicap the Saints' chances? And we'll get to Derek's question right after this.
I think it helps that 2 of their last 3 games are at home. And I know we just talked about home field advantage, but just thinking about like all the traveling they've done this season, all the things they've had to do in the games that they've won on the road. I think it kind of helps build momentum that they won their last 2 games on the road. Now they come back home and give that little energy, little boost for this team. Monday night games in New Orleans, they definitely mean something. I know, thinking back in recent years, they lost to the Packers last year, but whenever they play in prime time, they look like a different team. They're going to get Sean Payton hopefully back this week as well from COVID protocols, assuming everything goes well. So it's going to be a little bit more, I think, sense of urgency when they're playing at home. And they have losses to like the Giants and the Falcons earlier this season. But I think, having this Monday night game here in New Orleans, I think it's going to be important for them going forward. And then also them losing to the Carolina Panthers and Falcons earlier this year, I think that helps motivation wise too. They want to beat their division rivals in a given season, and to go 0-2 against one of those teams, it would sting pretty badly for this team. So I think when you look at their last 3 games compared to some of the other teams, I think it's a favorable schedule because of the setup of the schedule and how they're playing right now. Their defense is playing like one of the best in the league right now. So I think, going to this Monday night game, it's going to be important, obviously, for them to get things going offensively, but I think they're in a good spot right now.
All right, Derek's question is if the Saints should make it to the playoffs, because Taysom is more of a rushing threat, Trevor more efficient in the passing game, does it make sense to go with both QBs? I first of all, whether they should do it or not, my answer is I don't think Sean Payton would do it. I mean, he showed it last year when Jameis Winston came in for Drew Brees when he got hurt, because that was the game plan. They had a passing quarterback game plan. Then he went to Taysom Hill because they wanted a different game plan. I don't think he's going to have 2 different style quarterbacks in the same game. Whether they should do it, I'll let Jim answer that.
It doesn't matter what we think. There's no way in hell that Sean Payton would ever do that. So you could talk about it on social media all you want to. Taysom Hill is the quarterback of this team for the rest of the year, no matter what happens, unless he gets hurt. Again, social media can debate and say he stinks, and Zach Ewing can make all the jokes he wants and call him whatever he wants. He's by far the best quarterback on this roster, whether anyone likes it or not. He's going to be the quarterback for the rest of the year, however many games, whether they play 3 games, 4 games, 5 games, or however many games they play. Taysom Hill is going to be the quarterback. So go ahead and make jokes all you want. He had a better passer rating than Tom Brady last night. Trevor Siemian's 0-4 as a starting quarterback. Taysom Hill's 2-1. He's going to be the quarterback the rest of the way. And if you want the Saints to go to the playoffs, you want Taysom Hill to be the quarterback. So if you want to be 10-7, you want Taysom Hill to be 5-1 as a starter, and you can continue to make jokes into the offseason. He won't be the starting quarterback on September the 5th, 2022, or whenever opening day is, whatever week that is, whatever Sunday that is. It won't matter. They're going to find another quarterback in the offseason. It's either going to be Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson, or someone else. It will not be Taysom Hill, and Trevor Siemian will probably never be on a football roster again after the season's over.
Wow. See, my problem is
you want to take all those. I want you to take this, Devin. When you take this little piece of recording, record what I said, and we can come back and play this again in September. Because all the things I just said, I will be willing to lay anyone any kind of bet they want, barring injury. Taysom Hill will be the quarterback the rest of the year for every play, and barring injury, at the start of next season, either Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson, or some other free agent will be the starting quarterback. Most likely, I would lay it's a 75% chance that it's Jameis Winston or Russell Wilson is the starting quarterback next year. It will not be Taysom Hill. And you can also book this, and you can play this back in September, that Mr. Siemian will never be on a football roster ever again when this season is over. Go ahead and book all those things.
Are we counting practice squads? I just got to make clear what the prediction is here.
No, on a Sunday afternoon, he will not have a helmet or a baseball cap on the sideline unless he's coaching his son's flag football team, which got postponed from Friday to Sunday.
Hey, listen, I actually agree with those 2 points. I think Taysom is the starter now. Look, that's been written, and the one thing that he brings that Siemian didn't bring is this big play running ability. He can hurt you with his legs if you give him an opportunity to do that. My problem, Jim, has always been that listen, Taysom did not play well last night. You can't tell me that he did. You can't say it with a straight face.
100%. I think he played. He had about 4 or 5 bad passes. The rest of here's what people aren't talking about on social media. Okay, he did exactly what the plan was all week long, and that was to not do anything that was going to get him in trouble. And he only threw 1 pass that was even close to being intercepted. The rest of the game plan was exactly to a T, how it was supposed to go and scripted. He didn't do anything he wasn't supposed to do. He had about 4 or 5 drops, first off. And I just don't get it. There are people that see the trees through the forest. It doesn't make any sense to me. He is clearly a better quarterback than Trevor Siemian. It's not even close. And I don't even want to keep up bringing Trevor Siemian's name up because it's not his fault. He did what he had to do. He tried his best. And people keep dragging me back into the Trevor Siemian thing, but I don't understand it. It's a different team. This is a different team with Taysom Hill at quarterback. And if Trevor Siemian plays last night, I promise you, he throws 2 picks. He gets the team into trouble. They fall into a hole just like they did the first 4 games he played, and they went a 4-game losing streak. Taysom came back off of a concussion, didn't play great against the Cowboys, but I thought he actually played fairly well until the fourth quarter. He threw 2 picks in the fourth quarter because he was pressing, and he was seeing his first action. And what has he done since then? He was fine against the Jets, and he was fine last night. Was he great? No. He wasn't great against the Jets, and he wasn't great last night either. But he was good enough, and he was better than what we had before.
All right. I'm gonna go ahead and let it slide, Trevor. Okay. I'm gonna let it slide.
I get it.
My problem has never
disagree. I get it.
My problem has never been that Taysom Hill is better than Trevor Siemian. He probably is. He brings the big play rushing ability. Siemian doesn't do that. My problem has always been that you were pinning the entire 4-game losing streak on Trevor Siemian, which was not fair in my opinion. But a couple of score
numbers
updates.
Are numbers. Facts are facts.
Yeah, they are. They are. And the 66 passer rating is still not good. A couple of score updates to get to. First in the NFL, the Raiders are leading the Browns 7-0 early second quarter. Raiders have the ball first and 20 at their own 45-yard line. And then in college football in the Myrtle Beach Bowl. What's that?
The Raiders just fumbled.
Oh, they fumbled. Okay.
And
Live updates. And
Renfro picked it up and went off. So.
Oh, all right. And in the Myrtle Beach Bowl in college football, Tulsa leads Old Dominion 30-10 with about 8 minutes left in that game. And so it looks like Tulsa will win that game. Speaking of Raiders and Browns, quickly looking at AFC odds to make the playoffs. The Indianapolis Colts obviously helped themselves a great deal on Saturday night by beating the Patriots. They are looking very likely to make it, as are the Bills and Chargers. If you let those 3 teams in, there are only 2 more spots, and that includes the Ravens, who, by the way, went from minus 300 to just minus 105 to make the playoffs. And part of that may have to do with the loss. Part of it also may have to do with the fact that Lamar Jackson is not healthy, although Brett Hundley played pretty well, I thought.
Yeah, he did. I thought he played very well. But
I'm not totally sure. Yeah, that minus 105 may be some value there.
I was going to save this for Thursday, but how about those analytics? I mean, you go for it on 4th down early instead of kicking a field goal. And who knows when you're going to need that field goal. Oh, they needed it at the end of the game. Oh, they went for 2 again. Oh, they didn't get it again. You're 2 for 8 in 2-point conversions. But yet, Mr. Analytics, John Harbaugh, thinks that analytics they have a better proposition of winning that game with a 2-point conversion they did going into overtime. He's 2 for 8. So let me get this straight. He thinks if his team goes into overtime, they've got less than a 25% chance of winning. Okay, well, that says a lot about what you think about your team.
Well, okay. Number one, you just told me to look at the long haul, so you can't just look at a sample size of 8. You got to look at the long haul.
Sample size is the season. That's a season. But you don't need a sample size in a season.
Yes, you do.
It's a season.
If the sample size of the season is just 8, you're going to need more sample.
Well, they play 17 games. How much of a sample size do you want?
Well, this is Jim Derry proving he doesn't understand analytics. So
no, right. I don't understand it because
now we understand where it comes from.
Right, you're right. It doesn't make sense. You went for it twice, and instead of there's no way you can tell me that. I didn't mind it as much last night as I did against the Pittsburgh game. Pittsburgh game made 0 sense.
The Aaron Rodgers factor is huge here. I mean, if you lose that coin toss, you're giving the ball to Aaron Rodgers, and the game's probably over. I mean, let's face it. So
I don't have as much a problem with that one, but it goes to show that just because a card says it's 53%, well, it's really not 53%. It may be. I don't even know where they get 53% from, because that's what I hear. You got a 53% chance making a 2-point conversion, because 2-point conversions are not made 53% of the time. So I don't know where that comes from and what sample size that comes from. But I know this. The Ravens can't make a 2-point conversion, and yet they still think there's a better chance of getting that than going into overtime when they had all the momentum. I still would have kicked extra point. Again, I don't have as much a problem as you talk about the Aaron Rodgers factor. I agree with that. I still would have kicked extra point. But it goes to show you keep doing the same things over and over again and expecting different results. And all I've been hearing all year long on these 4th downs, things like this, it makes sense to go for it on 4th and 3 from your own 37 because you've got a 56% chance of making it, or 62%. Yeah, and if you don't get it, you got about an 80% chance of the other team scoring. So kick the football. I mean, but we're going into this whole – and you notice what happened last night, what Dennis Allen did, 4th and 2. I actually thought they should have gone for it in that position when they kicked the field goal. I was kind of hoping they would go for it because I thought the Saints had momentum, but it turned out it was the right decision to kick the field goal. So old school football and old school thinking still works. Who knew?
The 2-point conversion rate is, I think, 49% over the last 3 seasons. But you've also got to factor in that an extra point is not 100% either. It's about 93%. So
okay,
the 49%. Oh,
you got Justin Tucker. It's 99.8%.
The 49% times 2 points equates to 0.98 points, where the 93% for 1 extra point. Yeah, and Justin Tucker. I mean, my point is, it's, again, I said this last week. A lot of it turns into decisions that maybe we don't know about too. The coach may know something that we don't when he makes that decision. And sometimes, look, they just make bad choices.
Last night, Harbaugh basically said, he said that I wanted to go win the game there. He didn't say anything about it, any other decisions or anything like that. He even talked about the card and analytics. He brought that into it. And then he realized he was talking about it and he backed off of it.
And if they make it, we're talking about him as gutsy and a hero and the coach of the week.
And if Brett Maher misses a field goal last night, the Bucs probably win the football game. So we can say if all night long.
All right. Back to the AFC odds. Devin, what sticks out to you on this list? Bengals have gone to minus money as well.
It's the AFC North is a mess. I think that's That's what you can take away from this. I mean, they got 3 names on this list. The Browns, I mean, they're not completely out of it, but there's
They
still,
were off. I didn't put them on here because the line was off,
yeah,
by the way, since they're playing
yeah,
right now.
yeah, they're playing now, but they're not even completely out of it. So there's a lot of different ways this could go, and I think it really comes down to the Bengals and Ravens and what they do over the next couple of weeks, and I think that'll kind of lend its hand to this playoff picture, because I think the Colts are they have a pretty good chance of making it at this point. They're playing really good football. They remind me a lot of the Titans from a couple of years ago when they had that running game going with Derrick Henry. This year, instead, it's Jonathan Taylor. Carson Wentz doesn't really have to do a whole bunch for them to win games. The defense is playing fantastic. So they could be this year's Tennessee Titans, where they make a deep playoff run because they have good pieces around them and have a really good, solid core. So I think the one that sticks out to me in the wild card is probably the Dolphins. They've won 6 straight now. They put themselves in a hole, start 1-6, but now, they still a miracle, and they're going to need a lot of things to go their way to make the playoffs. But that's a team to watch, and especially if they were able to beat the Saints on Monday Night Football, they could be a serious contender to get that last spot in AFC.
And you're going to see some desperate teams on Monday night at the Dome next week because the Dolphins and Saints both badly need that win. You're watching Odds and Ends on bet.nola.com, brought to you by Caesar Sportsbook. Talking a lot of NFL. We've got a few minutes left. Going to wrap up with some college football, but first we'll look ahead at next week's NFL lines. We mentioned the Dolphins and Saints. The Saints are laying a field goal right now. 49ers, the Thursday night game is a big one too, and the Titans are at the point where they kind of need a win also. I mean, they're probably safe as far as the playoffs are concerned. They could fall out of the division lead if they don't start winning. Now, they do have the tiebreaker and a game lead over the Colts, so it's essentially a 2-game lead with 3 to go. But they, getting to the point where it's a little bit of a tricky situation. Another good Saturday night game, Colts and Cardinals. Ravens and Bengals, those teams are tied for the AFC North lead. And then another Bills-Patriots battle where if the Patriots win, they will clinch the AFC East. Jim.
Yeah, it really is an interesting weekend. And, I mean, obviously the one that sticks out to me is Colts and Cardinals. I mean, 2 teams going in opposite directions. I think the Titans are safe to win the division. They'd have to fall apart. They have a 1-game lead. Their schedule is not that tough. The 49ers is clearly the toughest game on their schedule. Besides that, they also have to play Miami. But if the Saints were to beat Miami, then what is Miami going to be playing for? We'll see. And then they finish up with the Texans. So, but yeah, I mean, the Colts are going to be one of those teams, like Devin said, you're not going to want to really play in the playoffs. And I don't know what to make of this Cardinals team. I know the last few times they've been in this position and they played to where they've had, they started out super hot. They've kind of faltered. And I know that one team 20 years ago doesn't have anything to do with the next one, but it's kind of a team history thing, and they're kind of repeating it. And I think the Rams are the best team in the division. So there are lots of interesting lines as we go forward. And that's one thing I love about this 18-week schedule is I think it's going to come down to the wire, especially with the 7 teams now. It's not going to be like before. You're not going to see a whole bunch of teams resting players like they have in the past.
Devin, those 2 Sunday games on there, Bengals going for the season sweep over the Ravens, Patriots going for the season sweep over the Bills. They would basically decide those 2 divisions. Do you see the home favorites winning there and putting the divisions to bed?
I actually don't see. I think both home favorites lose. I think that the Ravens are getting to a point now where they. I mean, it's amazing to me that the Ravens were even competitive yesterday. I did not expect them to really come down to the wire, and they found ways to climb themselves back into games. So, it's a tough one, but I can't see the Bills losing to the Patriots twice this year. The Patriots, to me, I think about that midway point of the season, that's where they kind of hit their peak, and I really think they're still gonna find a way to make the playoffs. But I just feel like the Bills are gonna make a late push here, and I still haven't given up on them. I think they still have a chance to win the division, and I could see them going in Foxborough and pulling out that game. And same with the Ravens. Ravens got beat down pretty badly by the Bengals earlier this season. I just don't see that repeating, and I think the Ravens find a way to win as well. So I'm on the Ravens and Bills this weekend. Also, a lot of these games, if you look at them, like the 49ers, Titans, Dolphins, Saints, 3-4 weeks ago, these did not look like great games. 49ers were kind of a mess. Saints, Dolphins, both a mess. Now they're games that are deciding the playoff picture. So the NFL, they found a way to, the scheduling didn't look great a couple of weeks ago, but things are starting to find a way to look good. And all these games have playoff interest in it.
And when you let 7 of 16 in each conference, it becomes difficult to eliminate teams. I think as of right now, this could change in the next couple of nights, but as of right now, only 4 teams are eliminated from the playoffs: Lions, Jaguars, Texans, and Jets. So everybody else, the other 28 teams, all have a pulse as of right now. Hey, before we go on odds and ends, let's check in with college football. We're still sort of waiting for the bowl season to really kick into high gear, but we did have a 6-pack of games on Saturday. Here are the results. A lot of underdogs covering, a lot of underdogs winning outright. The one exception to that was the Raging Cajuns, who looked for all the world like they were in trouble after 3 quarters. Marshall was kind of running it down their throat. UL found another gear in that fourth quarter, Devin, and just thumped Marshall in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, it was a theme of Marshall's season. There were several games this year they were up by double digits or had control of a game, and they ended up losing the game. So UL continues to find ways to win, and Saturday night was no exception. And look at some of these other things. Y'all were right about UAB and BYU. BYU did not come to play well at all in Shreveport, and we talked about some of the bowl motivations. BYU did not come to play that game, and also they didn't start their usual starting quarterback, which I'm not sure what happened there. So that was a surprise of the weekend. I knew UTEP would play pretty well, and they were able to cover that large spread. Fresno ended up winning, but definitely a surprise of the weekend for me was UAB BYU. I didn't see that one coming.
And Devin, you also called Utah State winning outright over Oregon State. Jim, any thoughts on these ones?
It was pretty much what I thought it'd be. I'm glad that a few of them were competitive and they were close to the spreads, and we could follow with what we were doing with our bowl picks, and people should take a look at our bowl pick'ems because we had a bad first day, but I think the Saturday, for the most part, we all did fairly well. We were all on the winning side of the money of the calling them bowl bucks. We had good days on Saturday. Today's kind of a nothing day, but to me, it doesn't really get interesting until after Christmas. So, I'm looking forward to those games for sure when the big boys start playing. But I'm just having trouble getting into Old Dominion and Tulsa and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's you got to be a big college football fan or a true degen or both to get into this one. Score. By the way, Old Dominion did score. Speaking of degen, so it's 30-17 Tulsa. 5 minutes to go. If ODU could get the ball back and score, they could cover the spread. It's, I think, 9.5 points. So
yeah, but Devin loses the under. So Devin doesn't want that. He
don't want that.
I want the
under.
One more touchdown beats the under.
5.5 left, so we'll see what happens. Check out bet.nola.com every day for our bowl picks. And here's the schedule going ahead. This is not quite every game, but it's almost every game. The schedule slows down a little bit here through Christmas. The first 2 SEC teams to play: Missouri plays Army on Wednesday in the Armed Forces Bowl, and then Florida plays UCF on Thursday in the Gasparilla Bowl.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, it's holiday action.
What is a Gasparilla, by the way? I have no idea. I'm being dead serious.
I know what sarsaparilla is.
Okay, I don't. That's something.
I know that doesn't answer your question. Yeah, it's like a root beer drink, right?
A sarsaparilla, I think. I don't know. Gasparilla.
Gasparilla. The name comes. Google tells me the name comes from the legendary pirate Jose Gaspar, last of the Buccaneers.
Jose.
There you go.
Okay. There you go. Well, okay. Well, and is that in Tampa?
Devin, it is in Tampa. Devin, can you drop some actual football knowledge on us from these games?
Well, I think the best one on this list will be UTSA San Diego State. I think it's pretty 2 evenly matched teams. Both kind of different styles and kind of that clashing styles that go either way in these bowl games. But that should probably be the best one of the weekend. UTSA will be without their top running back, though, and I believe their top corner. So that might skew the game just a bit. And then probably the other one that might be worth looking at is Memphis and Hawaii and the Hawaii Bowl, because it's going to be a lot of points scored in that one. It's not going to be a lot of defense played. So if you want points and you want an entertaining game, that's probably the one to watch.
If you're going to watch college football on Christmas Eve, mediocre college football on Christmas Eve, it better be entertaining, baby.
Oof, man. Well, I'm the only one I'm really kind of interested in is I am a little intrigued to see how Florida reacts now that Dan Mullen's gone a little bit. So we'll see how they, if they play Florida football, if they play like they played in the early part of the season, they should win easily over Central Florida. We don't know if they're going to do that or not. So that one is a little bit intriguing. But again, everything really picks up after Christmas. It really gets going, and then I will be interested.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it next Monday, but next Tuesday is the first full day of bowl games, and you got Mississippi State, Texas Tech, you got Houston and Auburn, you got NC State and UCLA. You got some good teams playing a week from tomorrow, so that's when it really kicks off. And then every single day you got stuff. So that's the week ahead, and that's the week that was. This has been Odds and Ends. Final thoughts from you, Devin.
I'm excited to get more bowl games this week. It's we get something to watch on TV. I'm actually probably gonna tune in to Hawaii and Memphis, so that is probably gonna be a fun game and probably the best one of the week in terms of scoring wise. But UTSA San Diego State is the other one that I'm really intrigued with. But in addition to that, you get a bunch of good football in the NFL. You get a lot of good games this week and a lot of games that are going to decide the playoff futures. A lot of teams might get eliminated as well. So it's going to be a fun weekend to keep up with all the action going on. Plus NBA basketball in the mix as well. So there's a lot going on sports-wise this weekend.
Yeah, Christmas Day will be a great day. Actually, it's not always, but between the NBA and NFL and a college bowl game, it'll be a good Saturday. Jim?
Well, I'm interested to see how much COVID is going to wreck this next week of the NFL. It's far from gone. We're seeing what's happened, what it's doing to the NBA, what it's doing. The NHL is not playing games across borders. It's gonna be a part of the season for football for the rest of the year. And I got lucky and had a bye last week in fantasy football, but I'm hoping it doesn't affect any of my players for this week. Austin Eckler's not on my team, but Austin Eckler's got COVID now. Don't know if he's going to play, but that's just the first of many dominoes that are going to fall as we go along through this week. And so is it going to keep affecting schedules? Are they going to have to keep moving game to Tuesdays? How is it going to affect the playoffs? All of those things are in mind, and I think it's something that we certainly need to keep a close eye on going forward.
Yeah, and the NFL did change its rules to where vaccinated players can get back easier now, especially if they're asymptomatic, just need one negative test. So I think that's the boat that Austin Eckler's in. We'll see how that changes things. I really don't think there's going to be very many more postponements. Now that they changed the rules, I think the NFL is going to say it's easier to get your vaccinated players back. If you have unvaccinated players and you don't get them back, that's on you. And we're going ahead, and if that means you're using 40 guys off the street, that's what that means. Having said that, by the way, go ahead.
I also think you need to get a light in your room, by the way.
Well, that was my segue, is that I actually have the light on in here and it's still dark, but I will be returning to the office tomorrow. I'm all recovered from my flu and everything. I just took one more day to make sure I wasn't still contagious, but we'll be good to go. I'll be in the studio with the lights tomorrow, and yeah, it's getting dark at 5:00 and I'm in a dark room, and it makes me feel sleepy. So Odds and Ends brought to you by Caesar Sportsbook here on bet.nola.com. For Devin and Jim, I'm Zach. Have a good one, everybody.